Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our virtual event today. My name is Elise, and I'm the Field Marketing Specialist here at Foundry. Just to do a quick introduction and give you a Foundry update. Today, we have our product manager for Mari, Rory Woodford, acting as host, and Tom Newbury, a texture artist, as our guest speaker. At the end of the presentation, we'll do a live Q&A. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask Tom or Rory, please be sure to add them into the question section on the right-hand side. Also, this presentation is pre-recorded, at least Tom's bit, for quality purposes. So just want to make you all aware of that. And the entire presentation is going to be recorded, and you will receive a link of the recording directly to your inbox at the end. Today marks our 19th virtual event, and we have 18 virtual events on demand on our Foundry Livestorm page. Our virtual events are a mix of webinars, skill-ups, and sessions. Webinars are technical deep dives. Skill-ups are focused on career advancement and gaining new skills. And sessions are panel-like discussions with leading industry professionals. For our upcoming schedule next week on June 16th, Rue McNeil from Framestore will be presenting Modeling for VFX Today with Moto. On Thursday, June 18th, Steve Wright will be presenting his Nuke learnings during a session. In the following week, Abel Vargas will be presenting a webinar, Look Dev in Lighting Automation in Katana, Preparing for Success. To check out our virtual events, you can go to foundry.com/events. And if you have any feedback or would like to get involved, we encourage you to reach out to us at virtual.events@foundry.com. We're happy that you're staying connected with us through these virtual events, but we do encourage you to keep up to date, whether it be on social media or on our Insights Hub. Our Insights Hub is on our Foundry website, and there you can find some great articles, case studies, and updates on product releases. And for social media, you can find us at Foundry Team or at the Foundry Team. If you have any work that you've done with Mari, we do encourage you to tag it with the hashtag #MadeWithMari. We love to see your beautiful creations. So go ahead and do that. And then, as previously mentioned on the Insights Hub, here's a quick example of some of the content you can find. Tomorrow, we will be launching an artist spotlight with Tom. So if you want to find out more about Tom's history, we encourage you to go and check that out. And then also on our website, learn.foundry.com, we have some great content from Mari. We have tutorials as well as the release notes and documentation. I'd also like to take this opportunity to shout out our industry partners, including Access VFX, the Academy Software Foundation, ACM SIGGRAPH, and VES, the Visual Effects Society. If you have some extra time and you're looking to get involved, these are some great organizations, so we definitely encourage you to go and check those out. And finally, we'd just like to say thank you to everybody who has participated in our virtual events so far and for helping to make them such a great success. In particular, we would like to, of course, thank Tom today, as well as Blur, for helping us and lending out some of their talent and insights. So with that being said, I'm going to pass the mic over to Rory for a Mari product update.
Hello, everybody. So I just want to give you guys all a quick product update of where we are with Mari. So the last webinar, I was talking about a bit of the work we're doing with the new shelf, which is kind of scheduled for our next big feature release sometime around the end of the year. However, what we're about to put out in beta, hopefully by the end of this month, is V4 4.6 version 4, so maintenance release. But this is not just any maintenance release. We've actually done quite a bit of effort to put in some quality of life feature upgrades and a few little new features. So one of the things top left is the for the breakpoint node, we're introducing a limited patch range. This means if you have a very large asset, say 100 UDIMs worth of spaceship, and you're working on a bit of the node graph where you're working up masks or procedurals together for just a small section, say 5 patches, this will allow you to just bake those 5 patches and save yourself the time that would be required for the other 95. Usually, here you can just limit it and then have a background color for the rest of it. So if you're trying to bake a bump map where you want a 0.5 gray as the midpoint for everything else, you can do that with the background color and then the limited patch range. We are introducing a local space transform tool, local space transform mode to our transform tool. This will really help with the 4.6 projection nodes, where we allow you to use decal placement workflows. Before, Mari's transformation gizmo was locked in global space, which really wasn't helpful. We wanted to try and move things along the axes and rotate them at certain angles to match your model. So this is now this gizmo now rotates the axes, as well as we've increased the hit area. So a complaint we had a lot was that you had to have pixel perfect precision when clicking it, and you tend to click through the handles and get the object behind it. This is now being fixed a bit larger hit area, as well as some control hotkeys to snap the rotation angle at 5 degrees and the transformation at a unit. We're also introducing a performance feature in for the canvas rendering. So now Mari used to hit your GPU as hard as it could to render as many frames as possible while Mari is open, but when you were away from Mari, it would still be doing that. So now we only have the canvas rendering when your mouse is over it, or if you're adjusting sliders or properties elsewhere in the UI. So we don't hit the GPU quite as hard as we did before. Top right, we've got a brand new refresh design for our edge connections in the node graph. So the ever polarizing debate of curvy lines versus straight lines, we've gone for a in the middle, where based on the distance between the two nodes, we go between a curve and a straight line. And if the node is behind, if the two nodes are kind of behind each other, we kind of have this nice straight line. And if you use dot nodes, they'll be perfectly straight. So if you want straight connections everywhere, you can achieve that with dot nodes. Also in the node graph, we've we've added the pretty names for the output ports when you're connecting material channels. So it's not just the 4-letter abbreviations. And then bottom right here, a big feedback we got was our fading palettes was really hard to kind of catch that little pin on the top left of a palette when you're popping out mask stacks, etc. So we've hooked into the pin open mode button on the top right of the palette sidebar, and now when you open mask stacks, adjustment stacks, or a channel layer stack, the pin mode will start in that same mode. And yeah, that's a good little update for Mari 4.6 v4 coming as soon as we can get it to you. And otherwise, over to the presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's just dive right in here. So I've already created a quick project here in Mari. So it just contains this one female head object. When you initially open Mari, over here it'll be set to user shader. Personally, for my workflow, I don't use this, but it is very powerful in visualizing your textures. But just make sure you set this to current channel to begin with. That's always the first step I always do when I jump into Mari. So the next step will be to create a channel, which I've already done here. So we have female head diff, and I'm only going to be going through the projection of the diffuse with you today. So here's the diffuse, and I've set it to 4K 8-bit. Now this depends on how hero the character is. So if this face was getting extremely close to camera, I may think about taking this up to 8K. But generally, when I'm working on an asset, I keep it around 4K. It always seems more manageable than using 8K for everything. So let's just quickly go up here to the UVs, and I can show you the UV layout. And yeah, we've got it across 3 UV spaces here. If I hit Shift W, you can see the wireframe. And yeah, we're just running across 3 UV spaces. So this is already quite high in resolution, considering it's just a face, and we've got it across these 3. It's taking up quite a lot of resolution. So if we set this to 8K, it would be extremely high. So there we go. Now we can get started here. First, what we're going to do is bring in some textures from Texturing XYZ. They're my favorite resource to use when dealing with texturing skin. So just pinning the image manager here, just pin that, and then we should be able to resize it here, make it a little bigger. And then on my other monitor, I've already got open here a female face from Texturing XYZ. You can also see here I've got some tilables that I've created, so cheek, cheek O2, forehead, lips, and these tilables have been generated because we're going to have areas where this where these maps don't cover on our geometry, and one of those is the hair region, the hair net, the back of the neck, things like that. So I'll bring these in as well, but I show in one of my Gumroad tutorials my process in creating these tilables from the photos. So let's grab these. I don't need the displacement, so that's the displacement, and I've got a cheek displacement tile here, but I'll just drag all those over. Okay, so there we go, those are now loaded in. And we can just start projecting. So I use multiple techniques when I'm projecting diffuse. Well, there's one other technique where in ZBrush I use this plugin called Z-Wrap, and I wrap the initial textures to the face, which does a lot of the work for me. But because I'm going to try and just show off exactly how I would use the process if I only was using Mari. So yeah, we're not going to do that initial process here. So with these available, I'm going to, we actually don't need this one. This is the raw albedo, but we want this one where the lighting, the shadow and highlights have been removed. Okay, so let's go to layers and let's pin this really quickly. And for when I'm doing skin projection, I prefer to use, I'm just so used to using layers in the past. I'm trying to transition over to a node-based workflow at the moment, but yeah, so I'll create a layer here, and let's call this one, I'm just going to call it face front, and then color. Okay, so I like to do each angle of the face on a different layer, so it's easy to mask between the projections. So face front, so I have that now selected, and now over here I can grab this and just drag it into the viewport, and then we can go about resizing this. And now in Mari, the closer you are to a surface when you're projecting, the more resolution you're going to gain out of that, and that's because of the frame buffer. And so, without going too much into how the frame buffer works, the closer you are, the more resolution you're going to get out of it. So usually what I do is I do a general overall projection, and then I'll go in and start working on areas and project a little closer for like the eyes and things like that. So we'll go about as close as the cropping here, so you can see it's cropping off at the top of the forehead and then down to roughly the chin. So I want to keep those in frame like so. And now I'm just going to close this out because we don't need it. And then I'm just going to resize this by holding down Control Shift, and we can change the size. But we can't really see the mesh underneath, so something you can do is hold down Shift and go plus or minus. And in this case I'm hitting minus to reduce the opacity so I can better see the placement of the nose and the eyes and the mouth. And so right now the nose is lining up but the eyes aren't, so I'm going to add a bit more scale here. I'm going to keep going until all three of these, now everyone's got a different face, so it is difficult to line these up sometimes, but I like to get as close as I possibly can. So it looks like the eyes are a little off, so I'm just going to focus on the nose and the mouth to begin with, and then I'll readjust for the eyes and eyebrows. So let's get it about there. And I like using the super soft brush. So getting a nice broad brush size. Oh, also I need to make sure that my mesh is selected. So I have that selected now. And then you can see the projection is coming through here. And now I'm just gonna focus, like even though I'm getting a bit of the eye there, I'm gonna be going over the top of that anyway, so I'm not too worried. And also I'm not too worried about stretching, so I let the texture roll off the sides. Oh, I'm actually currently also projecting through the mesh right now, which means on the back faces, if I project right now, it's gonna pick up this same detail, but I don't wanna do that. So I'm turning that off there. And there we go. Okay, so now the way I have my settings set up is I just move the camera and then it bakes for me. You can also hit B on the keyboard and it'll bake it down. Now you can see it's not 100% in position there, but we'll come back and refine that in a moment. Okay, so now for the eyes. So just move them into place roughly. And that looks like a pretty good placement to me. Let's do this side first. And go all the way up to the top of the forehead. Okay. And then the other side I might just adjust slight. No, it should be fine. And I'll project that as well. So yeah, in the beginning, like most things to do with asset creation, you want to work in broad strokes to start with. So I just get an overall fill in of the face here. And then as you can see now when I move the camera, we've got it stretching off the sides here. So what we want to do here now is we want to find another angle. And I'm also going to hit P on the keyboard to use the paintbrush, which clears the projectable texture out of the way. And I'm going to go back into layers and I'm going to create a new layer and we'll call this one face R for right. So, okay, close that and let's open back up the image manager and grab our same image again. And what we can do is we can line up the ear and the corner of the eye here. So there we go, corner of the eye's lined up. Ear is roughly lined up. Now it's very rare to get an ear to line up perfectly because the textures and the mesh need to they need to be the same size, and ears are very, very, like they're wide ranging in their size and shape. So don't worry too much about that. I've got a specific, like once again, we'll just zoom in on the ear soon and we'll do that manually. Okay, so there we go. So is that side done? All right, and now we'll do the other side. So hit P again, go to layers, create a new layer, and let's call this one face L cull. Okay, and then image manager and drag this in. All right, so same deal. I'm lining up the corner of the eye with the ear. So yeah, you want to use these landmarks, these facial landmarks, to make sure that you're projecting the skin at the correct scale, because that's very important in when you're doing realistic characters. Now the eyebrow, yeah, that's working. Okay. So yeah, you just blend until it works, basically. So I'm not blending all the way over onto the front where I'm losing what I already projected. I'm just blending until the stretching goes away, basically. Okay, that looks good. And so the hair cap and things like that, they're going to be filled in using one of those tileable maps. All right, now the nose has a lot of stretching on it and some missing texture there. Same with the eyes. You can see under the eyelids there's a problem there as well. So now all these regions are going to need some sort of cleanup. We can also actually texture some of the neck using this map as well, but I might leave that out considering we're limited by time. So I'm just going to focus on these more important regions. Okay, Actually, before I do that, I'll just show you how to throw in a tileable just to fill in the scalp. So let's create another layer, and I'm just going to go procedural, pattern, tiled, and then let's call this scalp cull. And then if I pin this and then hold down L on my keyboard, we have cheek tile 1 and 2. So I think I created a 2 because the first one wasn't exactly what I was looking for, but we can easily switch between these two maps. And you can see as soon as I assign that, you can see it covering the surface, and you can also see these seam lines. And we can remove those by instead using a triplanar. So let's just do that just to show you. But we can go to projection, triplanar projection. And so this is going to allow you to project on the surface the texture without those UV seams. And you just need to drop it here into these 3 positions. And then you can see it's heavily tiling at the moment. So we want to really reduce that. So let's take the world scale up to like 100. That's a bit better, but now it's too big. So let's go 75. Let's go 50. Still way too big. Let's go 25. Let's go 10. Maybe I went a bit overkill there. 5. Okay, so you can see these lines running through. Let's see what the other cheek looks like. Okay, this one looks like it's tiling better, so we'll keep this one. You can still see a bit of a seam here, and I think we can reduce that by adjusting the fall off. So let's go to like 0.5. Fall off 0.5 and fall off 0.5. It's actually giving us a bit of stretching. So let's go 0.1, 0.1, and 0.1. All right, that'll do. Okay, so now we can right click on this and go layer mask, add mask, hide all. And it's at the top of our layer stack, so it's going to go over the top of everything else. And now we can make sure we're using the super smooth or super soft. And then make sure I also have these other patches selected because we're wanting to project on these regions. And then I basically just come in with the super soft and I just start blending in the hair. So because this is obviously a CG character, we're going to be adding actual hair, and so we don't really want any hairs to be in our texture, including the eyebrows. I usually keep the eyebrows in until I've added them using, I personally use XGen, but whatever you use to add hair, I kind of leave them in just so if I plan to do any renders beforehand, I still have like some sort of eyebrows because the face, as you probably know, looks really strange without eyebrows. So I'm just coming around here, projecting this in. All right. So I use the super smooth on the front, but then when I do the rest, I just use like a hard brush. You can see there's a bit of hair here as well. So let's just remove that. So I kind of just take away everything that I don't really necessarily want in the initial projection. And now you can see there is still a scale discrepancy here. So let's go back to the top and let's reduce this even further. 4. Let's go 2. So that was the initial one. So I definitely went overboard there using 100, but anyway, that's still tiling quite a lot. So 5 or maybe 4. 4 looks like it might be a good amount. So you can see a discrepancy here, and what we might need to do is use like a HSV node with a mask to bring these values closer to what we're seeing here, which initially existed on the forehead. Okay, so now we can come around the back here. And once again, we have stray hairs here on the side of the face. The ear is going to be redone anyway, so I'm not too worried about that, but I will just remove these hairs here. These finer white hairs, like, it depends how picky you're being. These ones are standing out quite a bit, so I would probably remove these. And it blends really, really nicely, so we're not really losing too much of the initial information that was there. Okay. Let's go to the other side and just do the same thing here. There we go. And so the tileable, it's kind of crucial to grab your tileable from, or create the tileable that you're using for the scalp from the same map that you're using to texture, because it'll already be in the same sort of color range and hue and value that you're already projecting on, and so it's going to save you a lot of time when like adding this scalp region, because if this was very different, I'd need to do a lot of fix-ups like I'm going to have to do here on the forehead. So let's go to UVs here, and I think actually let's go back to ortho. I'm just going to close this out right now, and I'm just going to go the default brush. It puts down the texture faster. Another thing that I like to do, let me just clear this, what I just projected, is this tool, mirror projecting, has been fantastic. It's only, I can't remember when it was released, but as soon as it got released, I've been using it, and it just speeds up my workflow in terms of covering a large area. If I know the mesh is relatively symmetrical, this mesh isn't 100% symmetrical, but it doesn't matter, it still picks it up. Now, I would usually use different textures for the neck, but just in terms of covering this up, I'm just going to project this down. Just get rid of all of that gray, basically. Just trying to remove as much of the gray as possible. Another thing I like to do is, you can see it's getting quite dark under the chin here. I like to go to lights, go to light 3, and set that to camera. Now you can see we're really getting a nice view on our mesh. You can see how much stretching is happening here. So what I might actually do is remove where I projected it right here. Oh, whoops. No, I don't want to do that. Okay, no, that's fine. I just thought I projected in this area without really seeing what I was doing. Oh, so hitting X on the keyboard will switch between black and white, and because we're dealing with masks, that'll either add or take away our tileable. And so you want to go right up here to where the texture's stretching. So I'm using the soft brush there just because I'm blending with the initial texture. Wherever I blend with the initial texture, I like to do that. And there we go. So apart from some regions, we've basically covered the whole face, apart from around the nose, eyes, and ear, and the interior of the mouth, I'm assuming. Oh, this area didn't get picked up quite right, so let's go back to the default brush and just make sure we get that. And then behind the ear as well. Okay. So let's start working on, I'm not going to bother doing this blending here, but we have gotten a nice amount of coverage happening. So let's go to layers again, and let's create another layer, and I kind of just stack on top of one another, and here I'm going to say eyes. Close that. Now the numbers on your keyboard are going to snap to different angles, and so I like to sometimes snap to the angle that I want. In this case it's 5 for the front. I'm going to turn off the mirror projection, and now we're going to zoom right in here and we'll do this eye first. So let's open up the image manager again, drag this in. Now something that's quite cool, if you don't want to be dealing, if you're like projecting details and you don't want to deal with this entire image, something that you can do is go into Image Manager, you can double click on the image, and then using the crop tool you can crop over a region that you're projecting and then hit crop. So I'll do it for that eye, and I'll do it for this eye, and I'm getting like the surrounding region because I'm not sure how much I'm going to be projecting, but it just helps you really. I did a similar thing for the ears here, so here we go. It just makes it easier. So once again, we want to get the scale right. I also want to zoom in enough, and my initial focus is going to be the lower eyelid, so I want to remove these eyelashes. So I'm just angling, well first I'm getting the scale right, and then I'm just angling this in a way where I can just come in here with the soft brush and just get as close to the bottom of the eyelid as I can without hitting the eyelashes. And so there we go, that's projected on now. And now she has very veiny eyelids, and I don't mind that detail being in this region here, but I don't really want it on this part of the eye here. So what I might do is, like, you can get creative with your maps, and I'll just like flip this because it's in a similar region, so it should still work. Even though it's not the upper eyelid, it's more the bottom eyelid, it should still work in this case. And there we go. Now we have a little bit spilling over there, so let's just move that out of the way, reproject that, and I think there was a little bit on this side as well. There we go. And now that's cleaned up. And so that's how quick it can be to clean up an eyelid like this. Okay, so there's some regions in here which are missing, so we can go to the UV view, then we can zoom in here, and we've also got a bit of stretching here as well. So, and also you can see a bit of eyelashes there. So jumping into the UVs is a good idea when you're when you have areas which like haven't been covered basically. So let's zoom out a bit, just so I can see the eyebrow because I want to get scale correct. So I'm basing the scale off the size of the eyebrow, and you just want to roughly get it into the same area, and then we can kind of just, that's a bit too dark. So let's actually line up the veins of the eye here, roughly, and then we can, yeah, there we go. That's basically what I want to do. Haven't quite got that part there. And then the corner of the eye, I can just use this part here. Alright. And then we've got the eyelid area. So once again, I'm just going to use this part of the map just to stay consistent. I just ruined my scale there, but shouldn't matter. And then project that down, and then flip it, and project this side down. Just want to fill all of that in. We accidentally got some eyelashes back there, so let's just jump back. Make the brush smaller just so we can only hit this region. And there we go. And now let's have a look at how this looks. Now once again we have veins on the top eyelid again, and that's just because I couldn't see where the form was when we're in the UV view, so I'm just going to have to redo that really quickly. So it's just a bit of a back and forth like this until you get the look you're going for. So flip it around now that we have the correct scale, and then I can just kind of fill this in. And there we go. I don't mind the little freckle there. Things like that add a realistic touch. So unfortunately, that's all we have time for today, but I've shown you the foundations of how I do the initial block out stage of the textural information, as well as cleaning up the eye. I would then go on and do the same for the nose, the mouth, the ears, and then I would use a different projection for the neck, just because it shouldn't be the same tone as the scalp. I'd also be going in and cleaning up this seam, the dark region here, like the contrast between the dark forehead and this area here. But if you're interested in my process and my teaching methods, I do have a Gumroad account where I go over my entire process, start to finish, in every step of the way, showing every step of the way, every tool I use. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this presentation.
Hello. And thank you, Tom, for that wonderful presentation. I'm sure you're coming on stage for now. There you are. This is Tom. Introduce yourself.
Hey, how's it going? Tom, CG generalist, currently working at Blur Studio. Yeah, so guess we'll kick off the Q&A then.
Yeah. So got a question here for you, Tom. As you're using multiple UDIMs for the face, how do you avoid displacement map errors at the seams?
So usually when you're using the technique I was just showing you in Mari, you can project over seams, which is really helpful in Mari. And so I generally either just project over those areas, or as I was showing with the triplanar projection node, you can put the map in there, and then that'll also blend over areas when you're filling in regions like the scalp. I do the exact same process as I just showed in that tutorial with the diffuse. So yeah.
Here's a question. Should you create a blend shape with the eyes closed for preventing texture stretching? And how would that work in the workflow?
I've never done that before. I think like texture stretching on a region like the eyelids, unless you're getting an extreme close up on the eye, it's not going to be that visible. But yeah, totally. You'd probably want to start with the eyes closed and then texture that and then have them open. But it just depends on the production you're working on. Or if it's a personal project, you can do it that way as well. But especially when it's a personal project, I'm not planning on running an asset through a production pipeline. And so I don't really worry about it, because I'm not going to see any stretching, because I'm not going to be animating the eyes and things like that.
Yeah, another thing to add, Mari supports additional geo-versioning. So if you have an object you can, which you're painting on, you can go into another software package like, say, Maya, and move bits around or change blend shapes and then add those as versions. And as long as the UVs haven't changed, you can switch back and forth between these and paint the model with where the geometry is less stretched. So the projection will be in a more straight, less stretching. It's also very good for exploding models, hard surface models. So if you have a vehicle with lots of hard to get to bits, you can to get the wheels out the way of the hubcaps, etc., etc., etc. Here's a question. Is it good to paint a little amount of shadows into diffuse, or just let the lighting do the job at render time? So
yeah, when you're like texturing assets in 3D, you don't, unless it's a stylistic choice, which can happen. A lot of like the Riot cinematics, they do a lot of that. But usually, especially when you're trying to generate realism, you want to reduce the amount of highlights and shadows in your textures as much as possible, because that'll give you a more realistic result. So yeah, try avoid shadow and highlights as much as possible, to the point where I'll find reference which has highlights and I'll manually have to remove those before it's a usable texture. So yeah, you want to avoid that.
Here's a question for sculpted high-frequency details of skin in ZBrush. How do you paint color maps, maintain the relationship between the fine details in ZBrush, and how do you bring the model from ZBrush and Mari with all the high-frequency details and paint cavities, etc.?
So it's kind of a tricky one. If I really do want to use cavities that are coming out of ZBrush, what I tend to do is I'll bake out a displacement map from ZBrush of the object at a mid-value range, and then bring that into Mari, and then that's already giving you, it's basically a mask of the height detail, basically. And so you got the cavities and you got the high points, and then I can use that. And so in my process of creating, say, roughness maps for skin, I actually just take the displacement map and then just regrade it and things like that until I get the result that I'm looking for. So yeah, that's probably the easiest workaround in terms of getting detail out of ZBrush that you've already sculpted and you want to continue tweaking that in Mari.
Cool. So I saw one of the chats earlier about the world scale requiring a slider. So just in case people didn't know that any float properties, any decimal placed property in Mari's interface is actually a secret slider. You can click any point in the any decimal place and drag the mouse up and down, and it will actually step up at that decimal point, much like it has in Nuke. So even if there's no slider present, you can get a kind of slider control of these properties. Then how, Tom, do you integrate the utility maps from XYZ during your process?
Yeah, they do have a utility map option, which they do provide you. And I've actually never really used it. I think if I was really having to, I don't know, create some really complex effects and things like that, I would take those into account. But in my current workflow of generating skin, I just haven't really found a need for them. But if you wanted to create a more complex, say, subsurface scattering map or something like that, they could definitely come in handy.
Lisa asks us, if you're starting from a base mesh with no displacement sculpted, how do you maintain parity between your diffuse color that you're projecting now and the future ZBrush Z-displaced displacement?
So there's a technique which I use. I was explaining at the beginning of the presentation. I use Z-Wrap in ZBrush to project a plane of the texture on the face, and then what that does is that when you bring that out and then use Mari's transfer tools, you can then have the displacement and the diffuse overlaying each other perfectly in those areas only, though. That's the thing. But when it comes to texturing skin specifically, like as you could, like if you purchase some of these maps from Texturing XYZ, you can't actually see pore detail. And that's what the displacement is. So unless it's a mole or a scar, like the diffuse and the displacement aren't really going to, it's not necessary that they line up perfectly. And so, yeah, it's not something that I really worry about unless it is a mole or something like that. And then in that case, I'll either sculpt that in and I'll like bring the maps out of Mari into ZBrush and apply it and then make sure I'm sculpting in the right place. Or you can just add it on top of your displacement directly in Mari. So it just depends what sort of workflow you want to use. But that's kind of my take on making sure diffuse and displacement line up.
Awesome. And we have a question here saying, after you've painted the base diffuse using the paint buffer, how do you approach adding specific details such as freckles, moles, veins, etc.? Would you find another image, adjust it, and use paint buffer there, or do you just use the paint tool and add those details?
Yeah, it's a mixture of things. So yeah, either painting manually or like you said, veins. I like find high resolution photos of eyeballs, which have like a nice contrast between the veins and the whites of the eyes. And then I'll like create a map, either a tileable or just a straight map out of that as a mask, and then bring that into Mari. And then I'll just paint through that as a mask to apply veins because you get some really nice natural looking veins. I did a character recently where I needed to add freckles to the face and they weren't in the original map. And so for that, I actually just got a concrete tileable. And like concrete usually has like grains and like stones in it. And then I just crushed that down so you'd only get like some pock marks and then use that as a mask through another color, which is multiplying down on top of the base diffuse. So you get some really nice natural looking freckles. So it's just about being creative in like knowing what detail you're trying to add and then coming up with a way to generate that look effectively.
Awesome. Yeah, I know the artist guy, Kirchenbaum, he uses a marble as his base for all his organic skin. It's just it's rock marble, just tweaked with the HSV sliders.
Yeah.
So for authoring spec gloss roughness secondary maps, do you use your color map as a starting point, or do you create those from scratch?
As I was saying earlier, for like spec roughness, I actually use displacement instead of diffuse because it's more like when it comes to spec, I like the specularity of the surface is more based on the roughness of the surface, like the physical roughness. And so that's what displacement is. So if you're working in a visual effects pipeline, you're using displacement. You can actually get 80% of the way there if you're using your displacement correctly. And then in my roughness map, I'll kind of boost that up and use my displacement map. And so say it's a pore, with a pore, the deep part of the pore is going to be the glossier area. And then as it pillows out onto the top on a micro level, I'm talking, it's going to be rougher. And so then I take the displacement map and then just regrade it and play with it until I get specific levels and values between the depths of the pores and the tops. And then that tends to give me the most realistic result. Whereas the diffuse, like a vein in your diffuse map is not, like a vein's not really going to have any real effect on what your specular looks like. So yeah, for me, I more use displacement maps, just remap for that.
Excellent. And another question for you is, do you do anything particularly different when you're working on outfits, clothes, and other parts of the character besides the skin organics?
So clothing, if I can find where someone's taken really nice high-res images of clothing, like you can find them on Surface Mimic. Texturing XYZ also has a clothing range. Those are super helpful for like just because you've already got, if you've built some clothing in Marvelous Designer, you've already got the UVs laid out as it would be like a made piece of clothing, and then you bring that into Mari, and then you just start projecting the exact same way I was doing then to add in all the seam details and things like that. If it's a more background character, I tend to just grab a tileable, regrade it, do whatever I need to do to make it, to just sell the fabric. I'll also bake out curvature or AO, ambient occlusion, and then multiply that on top, or like where you might get edge wear on creases and things like that. That's helpful for that sort of breakup. So it's just about adding enough breakup on top to give it that sort of clothy feel, or like it all depends on what you're what you're texturing. But yeah, that's basically my process.
And for final question, what's your #1 can't live without feature in Mari?
Oh man, I really love the use of UDIMs. I just find that invaluable. Just because I believe like getting a high level of realism out of your work is all based on like resolution of texture. And so the further you can push that, the more realism you're going to get out of your final piece. And so, yeah, I think the multi-UDIM workflow, like I've worked on films where I've dealt with a character which has 100 UDIMs, and yeah, it would be a nightmare if I had to like do each piece separately. But in Mari, like yeah, I can just see everything that's going on all at once and just work on whatever I need to work on, and it does it in a really seamless way. So yeah, probably that.
What's the general resolution and UDIM count you use for characters in your personal work?
Personal work, like I did a test recently where I did a face with 4 UDIMs, which I think in that presentation was 3. But yeah, I did 4 UDIMs at 8K, and that was more of just a test. Like in production, I wouldn't really do that, but like for a full body of a character, I'd probably go 25 UDIMs. This is hero character at 4K. So yeah, probably around that. But it's all dependent. It always changes depending on how important the character is, how close it gets to camera, all those things. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your presentation and your time in questions and answers.
All good.
And yeah, thank you everybody for attending.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think that's it.
All right, fantastic.
Thanks all.